Hi guys, I know I'm scary looking. Remember, I haven't been feeling good. I'll be right back. I'm going to run to the bathroom. Lexi's in here laughing again. Kittens, please. Please. Lex, would you feed them? Hi guys, sorry. Nicole. Hi guys. Alicia. Hi Lisa H. Okay. Nicole. Larky. Elizabeth T. Julianne. Tina Bean. Kevin. Where's Stephanie? Steph. I was going to go to bed, but you wanted me to read something. Stephanie. The heck, Lexi? Oh, you had to open that box. Stephanie. We'll do some spooky Florida.
What did you think the note was?
I don't know. It just sounded weird. Why, Alicia? Don't be jealous. You're my boo. Hi, Denise Renee. Hi, A Heart Made Wise. Maybe she'll show up. I hope Cross-Eyed Betty comes. I just love saying her name. And Big Mama. Yes, Alicia, Doug was asking about you. He was worried, saying he hadn't seen you for a while. We said you were probably sleeping. Well, I'm just going to start.
Yeah, read the book that you wrote.
Huh?
Read the book that you wrote.
Thank you guys for coming. Lay back and relax. We'll get started.
Oh, what?
This is my thing I sit the books on.
Hi, Nicole Grovis and Alicia Biso.
Okay, we're doing Spooky Florida tonight. This one's called Pink from Daytona Beach.
That's a scary title.
She was always in the garden day after day after day. It drove him crazy. Every waking hour was spent in the garden, which meant that supper never came when he wanted it, and he had to go outside and kneel down in the dirt. Every dad blamed time he wanted to have a conversation with his wife. When he complained, she told him to get his own supper, even though she knew he was so bad at cooking that he could burn a pot of boiling water. So get some pizza, she said. He didn't like pizza, he told her. Tough luck, she said, and kept working in her garden. He wouldn't fit in around here not liking pizza. The garden wasn't the only thing that drove him crazy. His wife also loved the color pink. She wore something pink every dad blame day of her life. And most of the flowers in the garden were pink. Pink phlox, pink daisies. There probably will be. Pink peonies and pink roses. Choose another color, he yelled one day when the overwhelming pinkness of the garden made his head ache. So what color did she choose? Mauve. Mauve is just pink in disguise, he grumbled, and his wife laughed at him. She had an infectious laugh, and after frowning for a moment longer, he laughed too. Overall, his wife was a great lady to have around, and he'd marry her again in an instant. She had a great deal of charm, and she cooked divinely when she had a mind to cook. The house was always clean and neat, if a little too pink on the interior for his taste, and their garden really was a showplace. She put up with his funny little ways, keeping the medicine cabinet in precisely the order he liked it, and making sure he had fresh cantaloupe every day for breakfast. At least she couldn't turn that pink, he conceded, even if she did serve it on a plate rimmed with pink roses. They were getting on a bit in years when his wife started complaining about her knees. She would fit in here. She had some arthritis in them, and kneeling was difficult. She wanted an assistant to help her in the garden during the afternoons. Why do you need an assistant? He grumbled. Do you want to help me? She retorted. Heck no, he replied, and told her to go ahead and hire a guard a gardener. They were she was in Carolyn's Alicia. Hey Elise, Leslie, Romani. I just need a drink real quick. Yeah. Sorry, guys. One second. My mouth is so sore at the top of my throat. One minute, guys. Pink shorty. Okay. He didn't expect the handsome young fellow who showed up the next day to help his still attractive wife in the garden. Uh-oh, sounds like trouble. The fellow was well set up, too, with plenty of muscle and a charming manner that soon had his wife laughing and fluffing up her hair as they talked among the flowers. That drove him really crazy. She never fluffed her hair for him. Dad blame it. His wife, for all her arthritis, was still fairly young and good looking to boot. Some folks might think it was a natural for her to find the new gardener charming. There was nothing in it, they might say, but he wondered. Oh, how he wondered. Ooh. It's getting serious now. He started coming home early from work to spy on his wife and the new gardener. They were always talking and laughing together as they worked. He didn't like it. Then his wife went out and bought a brand new red lipstick, though she'd only ever bought pink lipstick before. That really made him suspicious. And she went out and got her hair cut in a new style that made her look 10 years younger. That made her look years younger. I don't know why I saw a 10 there. That made him hopping mad. Something was up between her and the gardener. He knew it, but he could never catch them doing anything but digging and planting and weeding in the garden. It drove him crazy. Finally, he confronted the new gardener in the driveway one afternoon while his wife was out buying seedlings at the garden center. The young man denied that there was any hanky-panky going on between himself and his female employer, but her husband knew better and fired the gardener on the spot. When his wife returned, he told her the gardener had gone home ill, and she believed him. During dinner that evening, he confronted his wife with his suspicions. "I'm not having an affair," she retorted when she realized the direction his questions were taking. But if you keep this up, he could get lucky." Her smart reply filled him with rage. A red hot mist filling his eyes, he grabbed blindly for his wife and started shaking her, his hands closing around her neck. It was several minutes before he calmed down enough to realize he was shaking a limp ragdoll figure that was no longer breathing. It took another moment to drop his wife's dead body on the floor in horror, realizing what he'd done and what would happen to him if he got caught. Ugh. I didn't think it was going to get this bad. Fortunately for him, the ground was always disturbed around his house because of his wife's incessant gardening. He just needed to stir up the latest patch, dump his wife's body underneath it, and cover the grave mound with the pink flower seedlings his wife had just brought back from the garden center. End of problem. He closed the house the next day, telling their friends and neighbors that they were going north to be near his wife's ailing sister. Then he went far away from the house among the pink flowers and tried to forget. A few years later, he sold the house to a young couple who seemed delighted by the neglected garden and paid his asking price without any dickering. When 7 years had passed without suspicion from the authorities, he decided it was safe to come home. He got an apartment in town and settled down to resume some of his old friendships and activities. Anyone who asked was told that his wife had left him some time ago and he didn't like to talk about it. Respecting his wishes, his acquaintances never brought up the subject. But he realized one day that he was still frightened of discovery. He had to know if his wife was still buried in the garden. He started watching his old house, waiting for the young couple to leave so he could check the hidden grave. When the young couple left for the weekend, he slipped into the garden at dusk and hurried quietly to the place where he had buried his wife. To his shock and horror, he saw that the old grave mound was still planted with pink flowers, and those flowers formed the shape of a woman. Ooh, that's giving me the creeps. His hands were shaking as he prodded the soil with a spade. He dug a deep, narrow hole, poking down carefully to feel for his wife's bones, but he found nothing. He dug deeper, widening the hole in panic. Still nothing. Her body was gone. Alarmed, he made discreet inquiries around the neighborhood the next day, speaking only to people who had never met either himself or his wife. One of them told him that the young couple had found a family gravesite on the property and had the grave moved to the local cemetery since they did not wish to maintain the grave at their own expense. He felt a surge of relief at this explanation, but morbid curiosity sent him along to the cemetery to check on the truth of the tale. Here's the illustration. Flowers growing there in the shape of a woman. CSI garden. He walked around for a long time, searching for a grave with no name. Perhaps it had no stone either. He could not be sure. Then he caught a glimmer of pink, and the pulse started pounding painfully in his wrist and his neck. Could it be? He walked toward the place, his left arm tingling painfully. Yes, there was a narrow grave with no name attached to it, covered with pink flowers. It was his wife. He knew it was. In that moment, the red mist rose once again before his eyes. The tingling in his left arm became a sharp pain, and he felt his body arch in agony before he tumbled down among the pink flowers. The whole world went dark, and his last thought was of a ragdoll figure in his hands that had once been his happy wife. A caretaker found his dead body later that evening. When authorities removed it, the pink flowers he had crushed in his fall never grew back on the unmarked grave. To this day, there is still a body-sized swath cut through the pink flowers that grow across the unmarked grave. And in the old house where the couple once lived, the pink flowers on the empty grave mound still grow each spring in the shape of a woman's body, no matter how many times the owners have uprooted them and planted something else in their place. Hi, Billy Jones. The end. That one was kind of creepy. Hi, help me, Rhonda. Let's see. Does anybody live there in Daytona? Daytona Beach? I know Alicia, not Alicia. Alicia, you got me saying your name. Robin Lane, I believe, lives down there, somewhere in Florida. Of course, we know Moo does. She moved down there a couple years ago. Did I read The Hermit before, guys, from Fort Myers? Well, you'll let me know if I did. I know. I'll look at the chat to see. And I should be able to tell myself. When I was a little girl, folks in the settlement used to warn us children not to go near the hermit who roamed the swamplands near our home. He wore a faded and torn gingham dress with a snakeskin belt around his waist and an old sunbonnet on his head. He carried a rifle in his huge hands, and the look of dark intensity in his eyes prevented folks from teasing him about his strange attire. Kevin, 70,000 live in Daytona Beach. Steph, it's about time. I told you to get over here, woman. Hi, Larky. Oh, that's funny. Oh, she did, Alicia? Aileen Warnes? Yeah, that lady, yes. Yeah, you're late, Steph. You're late. Kevin's going to mark you down. I was afeared of the hermit and hid behind my widowed mama's skirts whenever he came to town to buy supplies, which didn't happen too often. Sometimes I'd have nightmares in which the hermit chased me round and round our cabin until I woke up screaming. When I was 8 years old, some of the local boys started teasing me in the street of the town. When I stuck up for myself, the biggest of the boys pushed me down into the dirt. Before I could do more than gasp, the hermit appeared, towering over me and the boys. I was so scared I almost soiled my skirts. But the hermit weren't after me. He was right furious at the boys, and he grabbed up the big bully that pushed me down and gave him what for until the bully ran off crying, followed by his gang. Then the old man picked me up, dusted me off, and took me home to my mama. From that moment on, whenever anyone talked mean about the hermit, I defended him. He might dress strange, but he had a good heart, and I liked him. Hi, Mary Tackett. Yes, Mary, I'm tired too, like Carolyn, but Steph was wanting some stories. So I thought maybe some other people would come over with her because she finally made it here. The year I turned 10, I was out in one of the local meadows picking flowers for my mama when I found the hermit sitting on a stump, carving a piece of wood into a beautiful statue of a blue heron. I wonder if he's related to Rebecca. He didn't look up, Even when I stopped to watch him work, he just kept carving with those big, wrinkled hands of his, the curling pieces of wood falling all over his worn out gingham dress. Oh, well, Steph, sorry. I'm glad you made it. I watched him carve for a long time. I was fascinated by the way the heron appeared out of the rough pieces of wood, smooth and sleek as anything. It was amazing. As I turned to go, I laid the prettiest flower I'd found on the stump beside the hermit. I was a few yards away when the old man called gruffly, "What's your name, little girl?" "Emma," I said. "I'm called Emma." A few weeks later, I found a beautiful, sleek carving of a blue heron on our porch with my name carved into the bottom. It was the loveliest thing I had ever owned, and I put it in a place of honor on the fireplace mantel where Mama and I could both enjoy it. Oh, Mary. I walked 3 miles to the hermit's backwoods cabin to say thank you. I found the old man chopping wood as sturdily as a man half his age, his sunbonnet hanging down his back from its ribbons, which were tied around his wrinkled neck. He was chatting to an enormous pet alligator that lived in a pool near the house. His cabin was made of slabs, and outside the door was a chair made from a cypress knee. I caught a glimpse of a heap of raw cotton inside the doorway that might have been his bed, and the fire inside was burning on a flat stone. There were several gourds beside it, carved out into rough dishes. I wondered why he used gourds when he could make beautiful wood carvings like the heron. I didn't ask. I just gave the hermit my best curtsy, handed him the pie Mama had baked for him, and said thank you for the gift. The hermit wiped his sweaty hands on his worn. That reminds me of Foxy Bob, the alligators. He wiped his sweaty hands on his worn blue gingham dress before accepting the pie from me. "You didn't have to do nothing," the old man growled, though I could tell he was pleased. His dark eyes lost their hard intensity and grew soft and brown, like my papa's eyes had been. Papa had died when I was 6, but I still remembered his eyes. "I helped make the pie crust," I said, sitting down on a big flat rock beside the cabin. Are you going to give a piece to your alligator?" "I don't reckon alligators like pie," said the hermit. "Do you want a piece, devil?" he asked the monster in the green pool. No one would ever believe me if I told them, but I swear that gator grinned at him with its ferocious teeth and shook its head back and forth. The hermit laughed when he saw the look of amazement on my face. "Devil and I communicate very well," he said. I nodded, wide-eyed. "Would Devil like a chicken pie?" I asked. "Mama makes a right good chicken pie." "Ask him," said the hermit. Here's the illustration of the hermit. I did, and that crazy gator nodded his huge head up and down. I don't know whether he really understood me or he was just responding to some signal from the hermit. Whichever the case, it was a good trick. I came back a week later with 2 chicken pies, one for the hermit and one for Devil. Devil ate his in one gulp, and the hermit and I sat on the big flat rock and shared the other. Timidly, I asked him about his dress, and he said it belonged to his wife, who had died. The illustrator, Staff, the illustrator is Paul G. Hoffman. Well, that's sad. It was his wife's dress. He looked so sad. I didn't say anything else. But after a moment, he told me his story. He had once lived with his family in a settlement in Georgia, but he had quarreled with a man named Morgan, who was a direct descendant of the pirate called Morgan and a prominent man in that town. So the hermit had moved to Florida with his wife and son and had built a nice cabin on this very spot. Several happy years passed, and then the hermit, who was called Jim Baines back then and had dressed like a normal man, chanced upon the man Morgan while he was out hunting in the woods. Visitors didn't often appear in this part of the state, and so the hermit invited his old enemy to have supper with his family. Morgan entertained the family with tales of his travels, and after supper asked the little boy if he would go fire hunting with him that night, offering to pay the boy a whole $1 for his help. Good, Leslie. The little boy, called Jimmy after his father, agreed eagerly, and they left right after supper. Hours passed, and Jimmy's parents grew worried when he didn't return by bedtime. The hermit went in one direction, and his wife in another, searching for their little boy. The hermit found no sign of the hunters, so he turned back the way he'd come. At daybreak, he stumbled across the body of his wife, lying stiff and silent on the ground. She was unconscious and barely breathing. One side of her face had collapsed, as if she had suffered a stroke of some kind. The hermit carried her back to this very clearing where we now sat and found that their cabin had been burned to the ground while they were gone. The hermit was furious. Morgan must have done this, but why? And where was little Jimmy? He eased his wife to the ground and tended to her as best as he could, wondering what he should do. He couldn't leave her, but he had to find little Jimmy. Unless, he thought, his heart gripped with terror, little Jimmy had been in the house when it burned. Then his wife stirred and opened her eyes. They were wide with horror. Alicia. In a slurred, mumbling voice, quite unlike her own, she told her husband what had happened to her. She had been searching for Jimmy when she saw him with the man Morgan in a boat down by the river. True to his pirate heritage, Morgan had long been stealing gold from the settlers. He had taken little Jimmy down to the hidden boat on the riverbank to help him bury his ill-gotten gains. She hadn't known what to do. If the pirate knew she had seen his chest of treasure, he might kill both her and Jimmy to ensure their silence. But if she kept hidden, there was a good chance he would spare Jimmy, trusting that his parents would consider any tales he told of treasure to be the fanciful stories of the young. So she hid behind the palm trees and watched as the boy and the pirate lifted a heavy chest full of treasure from the boat, dug a deep hole in the bank, and placed the chest inside it. Jimmy was stooping over, securing the chest inside the hole, when Morgan suddenly stabbed him in the back with a dagger and pushed the dead boy into the hole with the treasure chest. Oh my gosh. She opened her mouth to scream, ready to fling herself at the murdering pirate and avenge her boy. But at that moment, pain had pierced through her skull, and she had fallen to the ground where her husband had found her, unable to move. She could see Morgan filling in the hole and concealing it with brush, but neither her voice nor her body would respond to her will. She was forced to observe the burying of the treasure chest and her son without being able to do anything to avenge the death of her little boy. When he was done, Morgan had walked right past her in the darkness without seeing her, heading back toward their cabin. The hermit listened carefully to his wife's story. It was hard to make out all the words, for her tongue was partially paralyzed from her stroke, but he learned enough to make him turn pale with rage. He wanted to leap up and run after the murdering Morgan. He wanted to avenge his son, but he couldn't leave his wife. His arms tightened around her as she finished her story. She was silent for a moment, and then a sudden spasm caused her body to flail about. A moment later, she was done. It is a terrible story, Hart made wise. No, not Morgan Freeman. The hermit cradled his wife to his chest and stared at the ashes of their once happy home. Morgan must have torched the house, thinking they were inside, so that they would not come looking for their missing boy, he thought dully as he rocked his wife's body back and forth as though she were a tiny baby. Morgan was long gone by now, but he would return someday for his treasure, and he, the hermit, would be waiting for him. There was a long silence after the hermit finished his story. And you started wearing the gingham dress and sunbonnet because, I asked at last. Because I wanted to be close to my wife, said the hermit, and because my other clothes wore out and I had no money to buy any more. Now I'm afraid it's become a habit. The old man grinned at me from underneath the sunbonnet as he said the last words. At that moment, I caught a glimpse of the fellow he must have been before his wife and son died, a fellow who was a lot like my dead papa. Okay, be careful, New England thrifter. Oh, nice, Alicia. Hi, Davita. I was going to message you, but I thought, well, you'd probably be sleeping. And this was just spur of the moment. Glad you made it. I didn't see the hermit for almost 2 months after that. I was back in school, and Mama kept me busy with chores over the weekend. I was sweeping the back porch one Saturday when Mama called to me from the sitting room to tell me I had company. The hermit was standing on the front porch with his sunbonnet in his hand, chatting awkwardly with Mama when I arrived at a run. We sat down on the steps, and Mama fetched us some cookies and lemonade, and then left us alone together since it was obvious that her company made the old man nervous. After a few minutes of munching, the hermit said, "He come, Emma. He come at long last." "You mean Morgan?" I breathed. The hermit nodded. Then he told me what happened. The hermit had been watching the banks of the river for 3 times as many years as I'd been alive, and was afeared he would die before Morgan came back for his treasure. Then 2 weeks ago, he saw a man digging a hole underneath a stout pine tree near the river and recognized the pirate that had murdered his little boy. As the hermit approached, the pirate threw a bone out of the hole he was digging. It was a child's arm bone. It fell at the hermit's feet, and the old man had given a wordless shout of sheer rage at the sight of it. Morgan dropped his shovel, and cowered back as the hermit, in his torn dress, with the snakeskin belt and sunbonnet, towered over him like the wrath of God. "What in God's name are you?" Morgan gasped in horror. Don't you call on God, the hermit roared. You are a thief and a murderer. It is the devil you should call on, for you are going to hell for your evil deeds. Who are you? Morgan cried once again. I'm Jim Baines, the hermit howled, and you killed my son. He leapt upon the old pirate, lifting him right over his head and running like a mad thing through the forest with him until he reached the clearing where his strange cabin stood, where his dead wife lay buried, where Devil lurked in his pool. Go to the devil, the hermit screamed, and threw the murdering pirate into the open jaws of his monstrous alligator. I gasped. Is he? I asked, unable to finish my question. He's dead. I think he gave Devil a stomach ache, said the old man. We sat there for a long time, watching the sunset over the trees. I didn't blame the hermit one bit. The pirate had murdered his family and deserved what he got. That was as far as I got in my thinking when the hermit stirred and reached into the pocket of the worn blue gingham dress. He pulled out a bit of paper and handed it to me. You hold on to that, Emma, he said. The directions to the buried chest are on that paper. Someday you'll have a beau and want to get married. That money will give you a start. I stared at the paper in my hand. But Mr. Baines, that money belongs to you. You deserve it after what that man did to you and yours. Hi, Annie B. The hermit shook his head. I want you to have it. I'm an old man. I don't need it. You're the nearest thing I got to kinfolk, and I want to make sure you're provided for. Provided fur. He patted my hand and rose abruptly. He nodded to me once, lifted a hand to Mama, who appeared in the doorway, and strolled off into the rays of the setting sun. A week later, a small carving of an alligator appeared on our porch with a note that said, "Take good care of Devil. He will miss me when I'm gone." The words were followed by a series of hand signals that Devil responded to. I studied the hand signals for a few minutes. Then I put the note in my pocket and went out back to look in our duck pond. All the ducks were huddled at the far end of the pond. At the near end, a huge pair of eyes peered at me from the murky depths. "Good morning, Devil," I said. The big alligator surfaced for a moment and splashed his tail in greeting, the way the hermit had taught him. Mama wasn't going to be too pleased to have a giant alligator living in our duck pond, I thought. On the other hand, we weren't going to be bothered by tramps or wanderers ever again. It's a good thing I made an extra chicken pie for supper, I said to Devil. I made a small gesture with my hand and watched the big alligator nod his head enthusiastically, just as if he understood me. At the edge of the clearing, I saw a flash of blue gingham and the wave of the hermit's wrinkled hand. Then he was gone. I never saw the hermit again. That one was kind of nice. I kind of liked that. I don't know what you're laughing about, but no telling with Alicia around. Did you guys like that one? Let's see. It's a good one, Davida. You didn't hear all of it, I don't think. Steph liked it. Alicia's so busy laughing. It's okay. We'll forgive you. How about one called True Love from Key West? Cross-dressing hermit stories are your favorite. It was a rough one, right? And these are supposed to be true, but who knows? You didn't hear it, Annie B. Thrifter liked it. Good. I'm glad, Alicia. Now we'll read True Love, Key West. Oh, Mimi lives down here in Florida too, doesn't she? Yes, I dox people. I will say what state you're in. He had been searching for his true love for many years in Europe, in Australia, and in the United States. He even searched in Lima, Peru. He had a vision of his true love when he was 12 years old, back in 1889. He had seen a raven-haired beauty in a white dress with huge, speaking dark eyes and had fallen in love at once. But hunt as he might, his true love never appeared. He eventually married, but finally separated from his wife. The vision of his true love ever before his eyes. It was after the breakup with his spouse that he came to America and found her where he least expected to. He was working as an X-ray technologist in Key West when she came through the door, weary with illness and yet lovely still. He recognized her at once from his long ago vision. It was she, his true love. I got you, Alicia. Let's see. She had suffered much during her sickness, losing first an unborn child and then a husband who ran off rather than support her. She was very young. He saw as he did her x-rays, 23 to his 51. No wonder he had not met her before. But he could see she had a good heart, and she was fighting with all her might to conquer her illness. He wondered what she made of him, a tall, spindly man with a pointed gray beard and a German accent. He wondered if she knew they were destined for each other. I don't know that she knows that, mister. In the days that followed, he made the acquaintance of her family and supported her through her sickness in every way he could. He even proposed marriage, but he could see it was too soon for her. She was still mourning the no good man who had left her, and she needed her remaining energy to keep her fighting her sickness. So he bided his time patiently, knowing that fate would eventually bring them together. More trouble came, and with it pain and loss. He became a tower of strength to his true love's family, paying for everything that was needed, attending religious ceremonies with them, even renting a room in the family home so they had extra income to help them through. He would often go to the cemetery to honor the one they had lost. In his heart, he knew that his time had come. His true love would be with him forever very soon. Thank you, A Heart Made Wise. I'm excited to get it. I still need to pay her. I did send you an email, New England Thrifter, with my PayPal name and everything, which is just 2scooterchick@gmail.com. So you can email me so I can pay you. Ugh, his true love would be with him forever very soon. That sounds creepy. He finally found a place of his own and moved out of the house, but he continued courting his true love, bringing her gifts and flowers, singing to her. He told her all about his new house. It was the perfect place. He'd have the shell of a wingless airplane. He'd have the shell of a wingless airplane placed in his yard. His true love would like it, he knew. To him, it represented the glory of love. He would make her well, and the wingless plane would fly them to heaven. It was a fanciful thing to say, but she liked it. He brought her to live in his new house so that he could help make her well. When she was good as new, perhaps even a little better, for love can transform a person, he married her. He was happier than he'd ever been in his life, discussing everything under the sun with his true love, playing music and dancing with her, showering her with gifts, and delighting in the mysterious half smile upon her lips. This was heaven, a hard won heaven, it was true, but heaven nonetheless. Here's an illustration of her. She's just called True Love. He's not giving her name or anything. They had 8 glorious years together before trouble came for them yet again, this time in the form of his true love sister. True love and glory of love. Oh, great, too. That was a shorty one to feed. Some people cannot stand to see others be happy, and it seemed that the sister fell into this category. She claimed that he was a monster, that he was desecrating his true love. It was a lie, but she believed it utterly, even after she had seen for herself how happy his true love was. The sister even uttered an ultimatum: part now, or she would go to the police. She gave them 5 days to comply with her wishes before she went to the authorities with her tale. It was something out of his worst nightmares. He discussed the matter with his true love that night. I think I'm knowing where this is going, but I'm not going to say. Perhaps they could fool the sister and the authorities, pretend to go along with them, and then flee together for a more salubrious place where they could live together in peace. He pondered long into the night and finally came up with a plan he thought would work. He told the plan to his true love and again basked in the mysterious half smile on her lips. Yes, it was a good plan. The police believed this sister, and the man was arrested and put on trial. Fortunately, the minute details of the law were in his favor, and his case was dismissed. The enforced separation from his true love was traumatic for him, and her family still stood between them. Disheartened, he moved to Zephyr Hills to be near his sister, taking his wingless airplane with him. Zephyr Hills is where my parents had their camper trailer down there. Happy Days Campground. They would go in the winter a few years, just for the winter. And there, his true love joined him, just as they had planned. By this time, age was catching up with him. His true love looked just as young and beautiful as the day he had married her, but he was old and tired, so tired. On the last day of his life, he lay down next to his true love and held her in his arms, delighting one last time in the beautiful, waxen face, the carefully molded smile. Only a few hours now, and he would be with his Elena at last, he thought. She would no longer be the corpse that he had stolen from her mausoleum after she died of tuberculosis and carefully preserved in the laboratory he had set up in the fuselage of the wingless airplane. Nor would she be this carefully molded life-size doll he had made after the police had taken her body away from him. His time on earth was ending, and his soul would wing its way to paradise, where the soul and spirit of his Elena awaited him. He clutched the doll a little closer to him, laid his head down, and died. So you guys get that? She was dead the whole time. He stole her body out of the mausoleum. Whoa, yeah, whoa. That's creepy. Really, Davita? I wish I could find the book I read many years ago. My granny was still alive, and she died when I was 21. But she was in a book club, and she ordered all these books, of course. And as they came in, I would read them. You okay, Lisa? What do you mean you're losing control? Really, Leslie? Really? Carl, somebody? Annabelle Lee by Edgar Allan Poe. Oh, I see you're laughing. Okay, Lisa. But yeah, this book I read, it was just so weird. This woman, young couple in love, and the guy died, and somehow he came back, and they were together on the ocean walking the beach. But as the story went on, oh, Grease song. Okay. Okay. Started freaking me out, Lisa. And he started like every day parts of him would come off. It was just so creepy, but he was walking with her and they would hold hands, and he was just, he was dead. He was decomposing. I wish I knew what book that was, because I would love to read that again. That was so weird, but it was so good. Yeah, creepy. This one's The Watermelon Thief out of Gainesville, Florida. When my wife and I retired, I had agreed to move to Florida on one condition, that we purchase a yard big enough for me to grow my prize-winning watermelons. My wife, who was sick of living in the snow belt, promptly agreed. She even more promptly, this keeps, would she, Lisa? Yeah, my granny would too. Let me unplug this. Hold on, guys. It's making a weird sound. Okay. We get another sip here. Yeah, my granny did too, but she really loved mystery books. My mom loved mystery books too. She even more promptly had half our back lawn plowed up as soon as we moved in, and planted a huge kitchen garden along with a rose trellis and more flowers than you could shake a stick at. It was really pretty, smelled wonderful, what with all those herbs, and was downright useful come supper time. Yes, my mom too, and my granny. Yes. And then later, the last few years, everything was ID channel. My mom would watch her, my dad, my brother. My dad and brother still have that on constantly. Okay, let's see. But because watermelon vines can grow up to 12 feet in all directions, there wasn't a bit of space left for my watermelons. That made me mad. My wife's a cantaloupe person, something I didn't know until after we were married, mind you. You can't expect a cantaloupe person to appreciate what it takes to grow prize-winning watermelons. They just don't have it in them. Fortunately for our marriage, there was a spare lot right next door going a begging. There was a spare lot right next door going a begging. It was more money than I wanted to pay, but I bought it anyway. It was that or get rid of the missus. After 45 years, I figured I'd better keep her around. Soon as the paperwork was signed, I was out there turning the soil and preparing it for my crop. Okay, Lisa, sounds good. Now, growing giant watermelons ain't easy. First, I had to consider what variety of watermelon I wanted to grow. Variety selection is one of the most important decisions made by the grower. The Carolina Cross watermelons I grew in Ohio might not work so well in Florida. That was the first thing I had to find out. Florida had a humid climate, and foliar diseases were more prevalent here. I had to be especially on the lookout for a couple of nasties called Anthracnose race 1 and Fusarium wilt. I spent a lot of time with the local farmers, shooting the breeze and talking watermelons over the next few weeks. By the time the spare lot was ready to plant, I decided to take a chance on growing my Carolina Cross watermelons and see how it went. At one of the big farm shows last year, a Carolina Cross had topped 200 pounds. Hot diggity dog. This guy's a real comedian. The best time to plant in North Florida is between February 15th and early April. Moo, this is up by you. You're probably sleeping, Moo. I was right out there, February 15th, raring to go. Of course, from that moment on, it's a battle with Mother Nature. Aside from the diseases your young plants can get, there's also a wide variety of insects that like eating watermelon plants. Then you've got to get the fertilizer and the irrigation just right. Yep, that water is real important. Too much can leach nutrients or promote disease, but too little can stress your watermelons, and that reduces fruit size and quality. It's not easy growing a winter, let me tell you, but my watermelon plants were thriving, mostly due to the diligent watch I kept over my crop. I had an early run-in with cucumber bugs, but I managed to get them under control before they impacted the whole crop. And only one of my plants succumbed to that pesky Fusarium wilt, which was just plain luck. I spent quite a bit of time in our spare lot that first year, more than I thought apparently. My wife Hannah started complaining that I was spending more time with my watermelons than with her. Of course, I could have said the same thing about her tomatoes, but I refrained for purposes of marital harmony. Instead, I cut down a few palm trees that were standing between the two properties so that we could see each other clearly when we were out working in our separate gardens. That sounds good, Nicole. Such sacrifices are necessary to the ebb and flow of happily married life. We even set up a romantic little gazebo between the two lots where we could sit on white wicker furniture, having our morning coffee and enjoying the scents from my wife's herb garden and the sight of my giant watermelons, which were plumping up nicely next door. Gotta get another drink. This guy is serious about his watermelons. This is going to be the last one, by the way. 5:05 here, or 5:25 here, I mean. And Steph, I'm in the Midwest. I'm not in the East Coast. I'm on Central Time. Let's see. I'd planted watermelons 3 times during the season, 1 batch each month, so I'd have a nice harvest all summer long. The first batch had a couple of 40-pounders, and one of the melons in batch 2 looked like it might top 100 pounds. But batch 3 was the one in which I set all my hopes. There was a couple of 100-pounders in the making, and a third watermelon I nicknamed Theo. Don't ask me why. That's the name that came to me while I was hoeing. That was going to go all the way, maybe even 200 pounds. Hot dog. Steph. I thought I heard you saying that in your channel tonight. Let's see. We picked up our first watermelon at the end of May, and even Hannah had to admit it was almost perfect. She ate it 2 mornings in a row, foregoing her usual cantaloupe. I can't ask for a better reward than that. We gave away a couple of the smaller melons over the next few weeks, and word started spreading that we had the tastiest watermelons in town. I didn't have too many melons to spare, since most of my concentration was going into growing the giants in batch 3. But we did invite the neighbors over when the first 100-pound watermelon was ready to harvest. You can tell a watermelon's ready when the ground spot changes from pale green or white to cream or yellow. Love you too, Davita. I'm not done yet, but I'll go to bed as soon as this is over. This story. Thanks, Davita. You too. The tendrils near the fruit stem will dry and turn brown. Folks came from all over our neighborhood to attend the event, more than we'd invited by a long shot, but we didn't care. Everyone cheered when I thumped the side of that 100-pounder. The sound of a watermelon when thumped with a finger is a muffled, dull tone if it's ripe, and this melon was ripe. I needed help carrying it over to the gazebo, where Hannah and a few ladies from church were ready with carving knives, plates, and plastic forks and spoons for the squeamish who didn't want to bite right in. Oh my, that was a very good day. A week later, I wasn't feeling so happy. One of the 100-pound watermelons from batch 3 had gone missing during the night. It's too darned easy, Hannah, I stormed, marching up and down the rows between her tomato plants. That spare lot backs up against state park land. Anyone can slip in and steal a watermelon. If you don't want it to happen again, you'd better build a fence, Hannah said, sitting back on her heels and wiping her sweaty forehead with a dusty glove. Good idea. That's just what I'm going to do, I said, heading toward the garage at once. Keep an eye on Theo, I shouted over my shoulder. By my estimation, Theo was already 150 pounds and still growing. I was lucky the watermelon thief hadn't taken him. Too heavy, I guess. He needed a truck or at least a cart. A few of my buddies from around the neighborhood helped me set up a large wire fence between the state park and the back of the spare lot, posted with keep out signs. A few feet inside that fence and all around the rest of the lot, we put up a quaint looking white picket fence that spruced up the lot while providing marginal protection from watermelon thieves. I was passionate about my watermelons, but I didn't want to be accused of bringing down the tone of our neighborhood, not when everyone was so nice and friendly. The picket fence looked great with the white gazebo, and I got a bit carried away and laid down gravel walkways between the watermelon plots. Hannah planted climbing vines and rose bushes to further enhance the garden. It took us more than a week, but by the time we were done, that spare lot was a showplace. Hannah even talked me into putting a fancy water fountain in the center. She also put a couple reflecting balls here and there among the vines, and I installed benches at either end of the walkway. Visitors started stopping by to gaze longingly into the garden. It looked so nice. Fortunately, all this activity around the garden seemed to have scared away the watermelon thief. Or maybe it was all the fencing. Anyway, no more watermelons were stolen. And a week after I put in the benches, we had another block party to celebrate the cutting of a 120-pounder from batch 3. We served champagne this time, which was a big hit, and everyone toasted Big Theo, which, by my estimation, was now a solid Alicia. By my estimation, was now a solid 175 pounds. The next night, another watermelon was stolen. Uh-oh, this is getting serious. This one weighed 130 pounds. So the thief or thieves must have been very strong to cart it away without us hearing anything from the house. Here's an illustration of the watermelon thief. I'd been sleeping. I'd been sleeping with the window open every night since that first theft. I studied the ground around the watermelon patch carefully, but couldn't see much. It had been very dry recently, and we'd had a lot of people milling about the previous day, so I couldn't tell which prints were those of a visitor and which a thief. I didn't see any wheelbarrow or handcart tracks, so that possibility was ruled out. Lisa H. I was all set to install a fancy alarm system, but Hannah persuaded me to take the cheap route first. So I went to the fancy gift store and got a whole set of jingle bells and attached them underneath the vines all around the remaining watermelons. And I triple belled Big Theo. That should scare any thieves away, I said to Hannah when I finished. And it will give us plenty of warning, too. I put my baseball bat next to the back door, just in case, before I went to sleep that night. But nary a bell woke us, and all the watermelons were there in the morning. After a week of restless sleep, I relaxed my guard a little, though I kept the baseball bat by the back door. Then one night, I was awakened by a ferocious jangling sound coming from the spare lot. "Someone's stealing Big Theo," I roared, leaping out of bed before I had my eyes properly open. I thundered downstairs and grabbed the baseball bat, waving it to and fro as I charged through the back door and out onto the moonlit lawn. Step away from the watermelon, I shouted as I plunged past the gazebo. I could see a dark figure bending over Big Theo as I leapt the white picket fence with a baseball bat ready to do battle. The figure straightened up, and I caught a whiff of rotten garbage smell that made my nose wrinkle in disgust. Then the figure straightened up some more, with Big Theo gripped in its giant hands. It had to be more than 8 feet tall. I got a good look at it in the moonlight and stopped dead beside the burbling fountain. It was hairy all over with long arms that ended in huge hands. The huge feet at the bottom of its long, hairy legs were bare. Its face was humanoid but flattened, and its huge dark eyes were staring warily at me as Hannah charged past the gazebo. She paused by the picket fence when she caught sight of the large figure silhouetted against the moonlight. I drew in a long, shaky breath and then said to the skunk ape, "You drop that watermelon at once. Do you hear?" I waved the baseball bat, but it was a feeble gesture. Big Theo was at least 180 pounds by now. Any creature that could lift 180 pounds so easily wouldn't be frightened by my baseball bat. The skunk ape made a funny grunting sound, almost like a laugh. Then it whirled around and loped away into the state park, easily leaping both picket and barbed wire fence. As I collapsed against the edge of the fountain, pouting heavily, Hannah said, "Dear Lord, what was that? What I thought it was?" "If you thought it was a skunk ape, also known as Sasquatch or Bigfoot, then you thought right," I said, dragging myself upright. "And he just stole Big Theo," Hannah said indignantly. "You got that right too," I said, throwing the baseball bat on the ground in disgust. "Just before the growers' contest too. Dang it, Hannah. I thought we left Sasquatches back in Ohio. Who'd have guessed they'd be down here stealing watermelon?" This one's dumb. Hannah stopped muttering to herself and started to chuckle. I glared at her at a moment in the moonlight, and then I started to chuckle too. I walked over to the picket fence, and we clung together, laughing and kissing in the moonlight. I was still durned mad, but what an experience. "You realize no one's going to believe this," Hannah said when we'd both calmed down. "Nope. We'll just have to say it was the watermelon thief again." I agreed, using the gate this time to exit the garden. "But I tell you what, Hannah, I'm going to the pound tomorrow morning and getting me a dog. Otherwise, we won't have any more watermelons to eat this summer." "I'll come with you," Hannah said at once. "After all, when your watermelons are done, there'll still be plenty of cantaloupes left. And a melon's a melon, especially if you're a skunk ape." "Ha, I disagree," I said, opening the back door for my wife of 45 years. "Your cantaloupes can't hold a candle to my watermelons." It was an argument we'd been having since the first days of our marriage, and we bickered amiably all the way back to bed. The next day we got a dog, and that was the last we saw of the watermelon thief. And the next year, I grew a 200-pound watermelon and won first prize at the state fair. So all's well that ends well. And a horse is a horse. Of course, of course. His comments are so funny. Oh gosh. Okay, thanks guys for coming. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed the stories. Be safe. Good night and good day. Love yas. Hi, Kathy Greener. Oh, I'm so glad it's Kathy Greenery. Oh, how funny. That's funny, Alicia. Good night, Nicole, Lisa, Denise, Steph, Leslie, Romani, everybody. Love yous. Bye. Bye, help me, Rhonda. Good night.